Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning for Issues and Views, Buffalo, New York's weekly public affairs program focusing on topics and concerns that affect you and your community. We hope the information you hear today is beneficial to you. Now here's your Issues and Views host, Todd Anderson.
Good morning and welcome to Issues and Views. I'm your host, Todd Anderson, and we're pleased and honored to have a special guest with us this morning, Jim Potts, who's the Vice President of the Special Investigations Division for NYCM Insurance Company, and he currently lives in Cooperstown, New York, the Baseball Hall of Fame. And Jim, thanks for coming and welcome to Issues and Views.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Jim, you are obviously an expert with respect to insurance fraud, and I'm sure there's different types of insurance fraud. Just tell us what insurance fraud is in general.
Well, there sure are a few different types. Insurance fraud is essentially anyone that is trying to either unintentionally or intentionally trying to gain any financial system, and in this case, from their own or someone else's insurance company. So it takes its form in two different ways. We break it down into hard fraud and soft fraud. Hard fraud is committed by a group of people that wake up every day trying to defeat that system. So they'll stage auto accidents, or they will burn down an overvalued property, or make fraudulent no-fault claims. Soft fraud is basically committed by people like you and I. So they'll have a legitimate loss, and they'll just remember that they've paid their premiums for 10 or 15 years without any losses. And they either may think that they're not going to get put back to whole by their company, or they may think that they're owed something. And so they'll just embellish their claim a little bit.
And give me an example. In what way?
Well, so if you have a car repair facility and your car is legitimately involved in an accident, and the repair facility offers to cover your deductible, and let's say it's fairly expensive because that's one of the ways that you're keeping your premium down. So your deductible's $1,000, and the body shop offers to overestimate the damage to your car by that $1,000 so that you're not out of pocket any expenses. So it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But if you realize then that every auto insurance claim that somebody has here in the state of New York, where an extra $500 or $1,000 is added onto it, that's a pretty hefty fraud tax that we all pay.
Wow. Well, I guess that leads into my next question, because you just said that we all pay. So my next question was, why should New Yorkers, or why should anybody care about someone filing a false claim for insurance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Eventually, as I just stated, it's going to get passed back to us either directly in the form of increased premiums from your insurance carrier, or indirectly in the cost of the goods and services that all New Yorkers consume. So a fraud tax, any kind of loss by any business is eventually passed on to a consumer. Mm-hmm. So the best thing that we can do is to be aware of it, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but to make sure that we're paying exactly what we should be and not anything more.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just recently happened to see a commercial of yours on television. I knew I was going to interview you, and then I'm watching television, and I see you on TV, giving, I'm assuming, different tips on different types of fraud.
Sure.
Can you go over, some more different forms of insurance fraud? I know we talked about car accidents. What other types of insurance fraud do people commit?
Sure. I should mention that, the ad that you saw is paid for by the New York Alliance Against Insurance Fraud, which is a consortium of over 100 insurance companies here in the state that pull together their advertising resources to do exactly what we're doing now, and that is to inform New Yorkers about the cost and effect of insurance fraud. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we've seen recently, which is particularly troubling, and it'll tie into exactly what's going on now, is that after the COVID-19 virus came to America, it didn't take too long for fraudsters to figure out a way to try and take advantage of people that were fearful of having COVID-19. So one of the ways that they do this is that they continue to prey on senior citizens. So they will call them on the telephone and see if they can get the senior citizen to give them their credit card information or any kind of personal identifier, such as their social or anything like that, driver's license number. And they will tell them that their health insurance coverage is lapsed, and that in order to make that payment and continue the coverage, that they're going to have to give them their credit card number. And of course, they have no intention of doing that. They're not even from their insurance company. They're going to steal their credit card, and they're going to go buy things with it.
Wow.
And it's particularly troubling because this is being committed on a group of our population. These are our parents and our grandparents that are fearful in this time because of the terrible things that are happening in their age group once they're exposed to the virus. So as an industry and as a society, we should be really troubled that there are people actually out there trying to take advantage of a group of people that literally are sitting there wondering if they're going to be able to be around their family and friends in this time of just turmoil. So it's just really distasteful.
Now, how do these people? It sounds like they're pretty organized. How do they go about identifying that someone is elderly and getting their phone number? And is there a way to prevent that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Family and friends are really some of the best ways to protect people. Getting on do not call lists are another way for consumers. Most people know this now, but there are people and networks that consistently violate those do not call protocols. And so it is as simple as people just doing robocalls to see if they'll get a contact back. So they really just cast the net, and they see whether or not anybody returns a call. And if they do, then it's game on, and they try and get that information from them once they've got them on the telephone. Or they can make direct contact. But again, there's no way, unless somebody compromises a database, for anybody to understand, whether or not somebody's older or younger. But if a database is compromised to where there are telephone numbers and ages, then they will prey on those people once they've identified that they're from that older group.
Now, you earlier, just a few moments ago, you mentioned social security number, and from what I understand, if someone gets your social, there's not much they can do with it. That can't possibly be true.
Well, it actually is not true. And so what an organized criminal will do with your social is they will create another identity. And in a lot of cases, the states, and even including New York, don't recognize then that there's a duplicate social security number depending on how you're using it. So they'll create a completely separate identity in order to which to commit that fraud under.
Really? And there's no way for the state to detect that?
Well, there is on certain things depending on how that social is being used. But again, in a private context, with an insurance company, for example, most companies do not search that social against a database. So, you're trying to factor in whether or not the social is being used for somebody who is, again, trying to identify themselves as a piece of personal identification in a legitimate manner, right? So we all do that for certain types of payments.
Right.
But that's all it's used for, is just for an identifier, as opposed to an absolute red light or green light before something's going to be paid. It's actually just something that accentuates whether or not it proves that you are who you are. And so that's something that you actually set up with a company, for example, as part of your personal identification number. So the company, depending on who they are and what they're using it for, again, will not generally go and check against, the United States Social Security database to see whether or not that number is a duplicate or whether or not it's even valid.
Hey, I want to ask you, I want to ask you about people who are starting their own business and use LLCs, limited liability corporation. But before we do that, I want to ask something about you. How did you become involved in this area of expertise and profession, insurance fraud? How did you become involved in that?
Well, I'm a little different than most of the folks that I work with in the industry. The old model used to be that somebody would have law enforcement experience, and I do not. I was in the service for 4 years and then came out and then started working for my company. And then I was put into various positions in the claims division, which would end up serving me quite well, of course, after I got involved in special investigations. So the claims background in my case really was the thing that helped. And so in today's special investigation divisions, you will generally see a makeup of people that have either come from prior law enforcement, internally from claims divisions or underwriting divisions, and now even externally, now that there are college education courses specifically targeted at criminal justice as well as insurance fraud. As a matter of fact, I just completed my master's program in criminal justice with a specialty in insurance fraud.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So, but the only reason I mention that is that just shows you that there is a need for this type of knowledge throughout the industry, and there are now educational facilities that are providing that knowledge so that people can take it and do something with it.
Now, speaking of attaining that knowledge, are there college courses you can take to become involved in insurance fraud as an agent?
Well, there sure are. There are several different avenues. The one that I took was through Colorado University, but here in New York, Utica College actually has an economic crime fraud degree that you can get, and you can get it as an associate's and as a bachelor's, and I believe that they've just gotten accredited for a master's in that program as well. So that is available to people online as well as by going to their campus. And it is a wonderful program. We've had some interns that have come through our doors from that program, and they're just great young people looking to take that knowledge and apply it out in the real world.
So now, are you independent? I mean, do insurance companies reach out to you if they suspect one of their clients committing insurance fraud? Do they come to you, or is the New York Alliance Against Insurance Fraud the company they come to in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually work for NYCM Insurance, so that's who my employer is. Okay. There are also third-party administrators or investigation companies that do exactly what we do. So the state of New York mandated back in 1995 that companies would either have their own special investigations unit or they would contract with a third party in order for that work to be done. So some companies like NYCM have funded their own, and that's how my division came into existence. There are other companies that either because of their size or because of their business model choose to outsource it to a third party. And so then they have to go do all of the things that we do, but instead of that work being done by a company employee, it's being done by an investigative company, which is a third party. So the answer is actually both.
Okay. Hey, here's a kind of a loaded question for you. A person gets in a car accident, and I'm assuming car accident injuries result in neck injuries and back injuries.
Sure.
A lot of them do. So then they end up going to a chiropractor.
Right.
Do chiropractors bend the truth, or do they work with the insurance companies? Are they friends with the insurance companies?
Yeah, the answer is C, all of the above. There are certainly a lot of good chiropractors and good medical professionals out there. However, there are some people that are willing to take advantage of the no-fault system. So if somebody gets involved in an auto accident here in New York, they are allowed up to $50,000 in no-fault benefits, regardless of who's at fault for the loss, which is why it's called no-fault, for the injuries sustained in an auto accident. Now, soft tissue injuries like the ones that chiropractors address or are supposed to cure, obviously are not as serious as a broken arm or a broken leg, so they should resolve pretty quickly. One of the things that we see from not only our insureds but chiropractors are people whose injuries should resolve after a couple of weeks that end up taking months or even sometimes years, and again, with no fracture or anything like that. And it's not that those situations can't exist, but it's highly improbable. And so when somebody does that, the insurance company is then forced to look at that claim and say, okay, was there really enough of an impact here to cause the damages that the person's claiming as far as their injuries? And are we being taken advantage of by the medical professional or a lawyer that's representing the insured in a bodily injury suit?
So the
answer is yes, all of those things happen.
So who's the culprit in that case? Is it the insurance? I mean, is it the chiropractor or the person? Because if you go to a chiropractor and they tell you, you have this, you have that, you have blah blah blah, so on and so forth to keep you coming. You as you're not the expert and you just believe what the chiropractor is telling you. So if it is detected that there's fraud, that this is fraudulent, who gets in trouble, the person or the chiropractor?
Yeah, that's a great way to ask the question. The answer is everybody's culpable to a certain extent. So the chiropractor certainly has medical knowledge about what should occur, right? But the patient also does too. So if you don't feel any pain and the chiropractor still tells you that you need to come back, you probably should question the chiropractor as to why you continue to need to get treated for something that really doesn't hurt you anymore. So that could be an example of the medical professional taking advantage of you. Now, there are other instances where the patient is certainly part of the issue because they know that they're not injured, and in a lot of cases, they don't even show up for the treatment. So there'll be a sign-in log showing that somebody attended treatments Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 5 weeks in a row, and the person went in once and then signed, 15 weeks worth of the ledger to show that they were there, and they'll never come back. And of course, then that is used to send bills to the insurance company, and then those proceeds are split up either by the chiropractor and or the lawyer. And at some point, if there's a bodily injury settlement, of course, then the patient gets money as well. Now, in a typical stage loss, then the patient will get paid a certain amount of money for going and continuing to treat or for allowing their information to be used while that's occurring.
So in terms of insurance fraud in those respects, it's possible for the chiropractor and the attorneys to pretty much use the person.
Absolutely.
Because they get paid. I don't know if the person ever even gets anything. They just get the treatment, but the chiropractor and the attorneys get paid.
Yeah, in a stage loss scenario, then the patient, the insured, will get paid something because you have to remember their personal identification information, that social security number, their name and address, are being used to make an insurance claim. So they will get something. Typically, it will be anywhere from $500 to $1,000 up front, and then more money later on if there's a bodily injury settlement. And then with regards to everything that's billed, then the chiropractor and the attorney will have an arrangement for who found the patient first, the person involved in the loss, and there will be a referral fee that will be paid in cash from one to the other. Right, so it's illegal to do this on the record. So there will just be a cash payment that's made from one to the other to say, I acknowledge that you're giving me, this person to bill, or I acknowledge you're giving me this person to file a claim for.
Right. Well, very interesting information regarding car accidents, because I was just assuming that that's where a lot of insurance fraud takes place.
It is.
But I'm sure there are other areas, and I want to ask you, because I saw your TV commercial, and you talked about some scams. So can you,
Sure.
We don't have a whole lot of time left, but can you make people aware of what types of scams to look out for in terms of insurance fraud?
Certainly. I can talk to you about something that happened recently out in Buffalo. You folks had a large thunderstorm that had some hail.
Right.
So our company, as well as others, have started seeing hail claims from that weather event. So, again, a lot of them are perfectly legitimate, but in some cases, we're finding people that are making damage claims to both their homes as well as their cars, sometimes unwittingly by their contractors or the body shops on their behalf. So if somebody takes a vehicle into a repair facility and they notice that there were a couple of dents on the hood, but that's really all that they noticed.
Right.
The body shop will look at that and say, there are some other dents and stuff on the car, and I can probably get those claimed as well.
Okay. Right.
And so all of a sudden, a $500 or $600 claim goes up to several thousand.
Wow.
And then the same thing with your home. So the hail hits a portion of your aluminum siding and puts some dents in it. Well, what about the other sides of the house where the hail didn't hit it, where through wear and tear, there are some dents and dings that have happened over the years. So a contractor who's looking to make some more money on the claim will just include everything instead of just the side that faced the storm.
I mean, you could even feasibly, in either of those situations, your car, your house, or hailstorm, if there was no damage, you could create some. You could get a hammer and hit your car, right?
I'm glad that you brought that up. There's actually video of roofing contractors taking ball-peen hammers and hammering shingles and creating roof damage to make it look like there was more extensive roof damage than there really was. And of course, on shingles, generally, a contractor knows that you get paid to put a square of shingles on, and that covers a certain area. So if only one portion of your roof is damaged, that's going to lead to a smaller claim. So they simply go up on the roof with a ball-peen hammer, and they create damage through most of the roof, and then they point that out to everybody so that they can see it, including the insurance adjuster, so that they will buy into the fact that the entire roof was damaged when really just one portion of it was.
Wow. So here, I have another scenario for you. We know that in terms of driving, if you're hit in the back, it's normally the person behind you's fault that, they ran in the back of your car. But I imagine that there are people who purposely, stop abruptly.
They stop.
And to cause themselves to be hit. And then not only, is the car damaged, but then they fall out of the car on the ground. Oh, my neck, right?
That's exactly it. Yep. And so that does occur, but more often than not, for a staged loss, there's what's called a swoop and squat. And so that actually takes two vehicles to commit the fraud instead of just the unwilling target vehicle. So let's say you're in the target vehicle, and I'm going to commit a swoop and squat so that you hit my car in the rear end. I will get another friend of mine in another vehicle to come up the side of us. Obviously, this has to happen on a divided highway. And then all of a sudden, that car cuts in front of my car so that I have to stop short.
Wow.
And I do, and then you don't see it coming, and then you hit me in the rear end.
Wow.
And so that provides the plausible deniability that I'm not even involved in it, even though I actually wanted you and caused you to hit my car in the rear.
Wow.
Because stopping short, if you said, listen, I saw this to the police officer, there was nothing in front of him to make him slam on his brakes. As opposed to, yes, I saw another car cut him off and he had to slam on his brakes.
Wow.
Then that makes it look like the other car, meaning my car, is innocent. And so I wouldn't be a suspect in committing a staged loss when, in fact, that's exactly what just occurred.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you have your hands full.
We do.
We don't have a whole lot of time left. I mean, this is very interesting. I'd like to go over some more scenarios, but we don't have a whole lot of time. More importantly, I want to ask you, how do we stop insurance fraud? And for any listeners listening that might suspect something has happened to them, how can we get more information?
Well, that's what we're doing right here. So we're trying to create a dialogue so that we can get some information out there so that people can understand that they can unwittingly be pulled into part of an insurance scam. So again, I said there's hard and soft fraud. You may not be one of those people that wakes up today saying, I'm going to commit insurance fraud. Somebody can do it on your behalf, sometimes without you even knowing it. So one of the things that we want to do is to educate people. And the Alliance Against Insurance Fraud has a website that is fraudny.com.
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 Okay.
And we also have a toll-free number, 844-FRAUD-NY.
All right, I want to repeat that. I want to repeat that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
844-FRAUD, which is FRAUD.
AUD-NY.
NY.
And so from the website, obviously, there are different scenarios and some of the things that we've just talked about today, as well as what a person can do if they suspect that they've been a victim of insurance fraud or if they know that they've been a victim of insurance fraud. And that is what that toll-free number is for as well. So somebody can call and we will point them in the right direction so that they can see that there's something done about it so that we don't all end up paying that fraud tax here in the state of New York.
Right. And 2 minutes left. Talk to me about how children are exploited in terms of insurance fraud.
Here in New York, probably in most cases with a no-fault claim. And, without being able to tell whether or not the child was injured or whether or not it was as a result of the auto accident. In a lot of cases, and it just sounds scary when we talk about it, that the parents will actually bring the children to the chiropractor's office and have them start getting treated right along with them. Now,
really?
In a lot of these cases, we know that treatment doesn't occur, so it's not as bad as it sounds. But the insurance company is still being billed for the minor as well as the adult that was in the car.
Wow.
And so, they just, it's the child just becomes another passenger in the car for the system to work with so that the insurance company can be billed for it.
If you're caught committing insurance fraud, what's the consequence?
Well, that's a really good way to wrap things up. There are misdemeanors and felonies through all of the things that we've talked about. There is the submission of a fraudulent instrument in the case of the police report and making a false statement. So there are just a variety of different things that somebody can be charged with if they commit insurance fraud, as well as specific insurance fraud crimes. So what I can tell you is that they're just like every other felony, and there will be significant reductions in what a person's freedoms can be. You can't vote, you can't travel, you can't do a lot of things for a while if you get convicted of a crime. So what we would tell people is that if you feel like your back's up against the wall because of the financial pressures, because of COVID-19 or anything, is just not to use insurance fraud as a way to dig yourself out of that hole, because it can have long-lasting effects if you get caught.
Right. All right. Well, Jim Potts, thank you very much. Great information, and like to have you back at some point and talk to you some more, because I'm sure there's some stuff that we didn't cover. But I just want to give this phone number out again. If anyone is interested in more information about insurance fraud, the number is 844-FRAUD-NY. That's FRAUDNY. And the website, once again, Jim, is
fraudny.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Great information.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
The views, opinions, and comments expressed on the program are those of the participants and not necessarily of this station.